Have you ever wondered what would happen if a civilization older than time itself suddenly appeared in our world? What if the cold, merciless sentinels of the cosmos creatures who have survived millennia, outliving stars and empires, stepped through the thin veil separating universes and found themselves standing on our Earth? Imagine the night sky blinking with unnatural light, the hum of unimaginable technology vibrating through the ground, and a terror so profound that even the bravest armies would hesitate before raising a weapon. This is not a question of if. It is a question of when. And if you stay with me until the end, I promise you a revelation that will forever change how you see the universe and your place within it. Our story begins not in our universe, but in the yawning void of the Warhammer 40,000 galaxy, a place of endless war and cosmic decay. Warhammer itself was born from humanity's fascination with conflict, power, and dark myth. Its creators imagined a universe where hope and despair clash across light, years, where heroes and monsters alike are forged by circumstance and bloodshed. From this foundation arose the Necrons, a race so ancient that their memories predate the birth of the stars they now traverse. They were once flesh and bone, known as the Necronter, whose short, painful lives were defined by the cruel radiation of their dying sun and the bitter knowledge that they would never know more than a fleeting existence. Driven by envy and despair, they were seduced by the promise of immortality by a race of beings who called themselves the C'tan, star gods of pure energy and terrible ambition. The transformation was complete, and the Necronter became Necrons. Their flesh was stripped away, replaced with living metal bodies, their emotions hollowed, their souls bound in crypts beneath the stars. They became weapons of perfect efficiency, their minds as cold and unyielding as the metal that encased them. Power, for the Necrons, is not granted, it is forged. Each Necron awakens not through chance, but through millennia of preparation, hidden beneath planets forgotten by time, waiting for the moment their dynasties will rise again. They remember nothing of compassion, they feel nothing but purpose, and their purpose is clear: the reclamation of the stars and the elimination of all who oppose them. Now imagine a breach, an impossible rift between realities. No one knows precisely how it occurred. Some scientists speculate a fluctuation in dark matter, a tear caused by experimental particle accelerators exceeding natural limits. Others whisper of ancient rituals, attempts to harness energy beyond comprehension, or of the cosmos itself bending in response to humanity's unrelenting expansion. Regardless of its origin, the breach opened and the Necrons stepped through. Earth, the cradle of humanity, so young, so fragile, so naive, would be their first step. They did not arrive as conquerors demanding negotiation. They arrived as inevitability incarnate, their tomb ships drifting silently through the void, casting shadows over cities that had never known fear of the stars themselves. Each step of their advance resonated with a hum that bypassed hearing and entered the bones, a vibration that spoke directly to the primal part of the mind that understood true power. The world's armies scrambled, not just against each other, but against a force that made conventional tactics meaningless. Among humanity, some sensed this change before it became undeniable. Scientists working on deep space observatories noted anomalies, entire star clusters disappearing from telescopes, the subtle disappearance of radio signals from distant probes. Governments dismissed these warnings as coincidence or optical interference, but a few scattered individuals, military strategists, physicists, even historians recognized the pattern. And among these, one figure emerged, Dr. Ilara Voss. She was a xenophysicist, brilliant beyond recognition, haunted by the loss of her mentor to a failed warp experiment. Her knowledge of dimensional physics and the arcane mechanics of reality itself placed her uniquely to understand the threat. Dr. Voss's first encounter with a Necron was not dramatic. It was subtle. A tremor beneath her laboratory floor, lights flickering in a precise, unnatural rhythm, a metallic whisper through the ventilation systems. When she saw it, an awakening cryptek emerging from a rift, its eyes burning with star light, she did not scream. She understood. These were no aliens in the conventional sense. They were a force of the universe itself, a remnant of a war older than Earth. Their power was absolute. In the hours that followed, humanity began to grasp the impossible truth. Conventional weapons were futile. Bullets shattered on the Necron's living metal form. Missiles detonated with negligible effect. Even nuclear devices were insufficient to disrupt their ranks. The Necrons, having mastered the art of war over eons, employed technologies that rewrote the laws of physics around them. Teleportation fields that ignored gravity, Gauss weaponry that stripped molecules layer by layer, and temporal displacers capable of erasing moments before they occurred. The planet's governments were paralyzed by disbelief. And in this paralysis, the Necrons advanced. But the story is never complete without resistance. The human spirit, stubborn and desperate, began to manifest in those who would rise against the tide. Some found power in science, devising experimental energy weapons meant to pierce the Necrons' metal hides. Others discovered latent psychic abilities, dormant potentials unlocked by the sheer proximity of cosmic horror. One such figure was Captain Rin Voss, a former military officer who had survived the first wave of attacks in the ruins of a city now called Ashfall. He bore the scars of Necron weaponry, and yet in those scars he found a strange clarity, a whisper from something beyond human comprehension that granted him courage and strategic insight. The world was unprepared, but human ingenuity, fueled by desperation, began to spark in the shadows. Meanwhile, the Necrons themselves were not monolithic. Ancient dynasties, like the Sotek and Mefrit, each carried their own agendas. Their awakening was not merely conquest. It was reclamation, a return to dominion over matter itself. And as they walked the earth, they carried with them fragments of their long, lost history, holographic echoes of the Warhammer galaxy, memories of wars that had ended eons ago, and the cruel whispers of the Seat and who had once enslaved them. Earth was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a battleground for powers incomprehensible, a testing ground for a war whose echoes would ripple across the multiverse. As the Necron tomb ships settled across continents, cities fell under the unyielding order of their rule. The world began to recognize a terrifying truth. This was not merely an invasion. It was a rewriting of reality. Laws of nature bent to their will. Time itself could be fractured with their technology. And yet, for all their perfection, a question lingered in the minds of those who watched from hiding. Could humanity, fragile and fleeting, possibly stand against beings who had conquered entire galaxies and survived countless civilizational collapses? Dr. Voss, Captain Voss, and a coalition of the unlikeliest heroes emerged as the first line of resistance. Their journey would not be simple. They would face betrayals, impossible choices, and moral dilemmas that defied understanding. Every encounter with a Necron forced humanity to redefine its very notion of courage, survival, and sacrifice. The true test was not in weapons or tactics. It was in the capacity to endure what no human mind was built to comprehend. And here is the offer I promised. If you continue to the next part, you will learn not only how humanity discovers a secret buried in the Necron's own history, a weakness that could be exploited, but also witness the first true awakening of powers within ordinary humans, gifts born of desperation and cosmic proximity, that may be the only thing standing between Earth and annihilation. But for now, ask yourself this as you consider the shadows creeping across our skies. When eternity itself comes calling, and a race older than time stares into your reality, how far would you go to survive or to fight back? When the first Necron tomb ship emerged from the void above Earth, the planet collectively held its breath, though none truly understood why. Satellites went dark, global communications faltered, and an unnatural chill swept the northern hemisphere, as if the world itself recoiled at the arrival of beings older than the stars. Humanity's response was disorganized panic, an orchestra of chaos, fear, and disbelief. Yet amidst the turmoil, pockets of resolve emerged. The realization settled slowly, painfully, that conventional warfare was obsolete. Conventional reasoning was obsolete. Humanity faced an enemy who had perfected war over 10,000 generations, a force whose only thought was order, whose only law was annihilation. Dr. Ilara Voss worked tirelessly in her lab, converting her equipment into instruments capable of detecting the Necron's energy signatures. Her mind, already sharpened by years of studying dimensions and exotic matter, now became a scalpel against the unknown. She discovered that the Necron presence resonated on frequencies invisible to the naked eye, bending the electromagnetic spectrum, leaving trails in reality itself. Her calculations were precise, terrifying, and singularly urgent. The Necrons were not just attacking, they were terraforming the planet to suit their incomprehensible needs. Cities were not merely targets, they were laboratories, stages upon which these ancient warriors demonstrated their dominion over matter. Meanwhile, Captain Rin Voss gathered survivors in the ruins of what had once been Paris. He was no longer just a soldier, he had become a strategist for the improbable. Each encounter with the Necrons forced him to adapt faster than instinct allowed. In the shattered streets, he observed the enemy's methodical advance, Necron warriors emerging from tombs as if they had always existed in that precise location, machines lifting entire buildings with terrifying ease, and the subtle, almost imperceptible energy fields that neutralized human firearms. These encounters etched lessons into the minds of survivors, lessons that blurred the line between science and what could only be described as the uncanny. As the first confrontations escalated, humanity began to uncover fragments of hope. An abandoned underground facility in what was once Tokyo revealed Necron technology buried beneath centuries of sediment. Ancient circuits, resonant with quantum memory, hummed with stored knowledge. Among the ruins, a lone cryptek, seemingly left behind as if in error, activated only when Dr. Voss approached. Its presence was not hostile, yet it spoke a silent challenge. Dr. Voss realized that the Necrons were not mindless. Their logic extended beyond death, beyond time itself. And within that logic, a weakness might exist, a chink in armor invisible to those untrained in the patterns of eternity. Psychic phenomena, long dismissed by humanity as superstition, began manifesting under the pressure of cosmic proximity. Ordinary individuals discovered extraordinary abilities, visions of temporal distortions, the manipulation of energy flows, and glimpses of the Necron mind in fractured, fleeting flashes. Among them was Kara Sun, a young researcher who had survived the first wave of Necron strikes in London. Exposure to a disrupted dimensional field had awakened within her the ability to sense the Necron movements before they occurred. This gift, though raw and perilous, offered the first real hope that humanity might anticipate, rather than merely react to, the alien onslaught. Yet power is rarely without cost. Each human who awakened to these abilities felt the strain almost immediately. Fatigue that drained bone and mind, visions that threatened sanity, and a creeping awareness of the abyss that Necrons represented. Captain Voss's tactical council, once composed of ordinary military officers, now included scientists, psychics, and engineers who were learning to trust instincts shaped by fear and revelation. Their victories were small and tactical, yet significant. For the first time, humanity realized that survival might not be impossible if courage could match ancient power. The Necrons, for all their perfection, were not omniscient. Their awakening on Earth had not accounted for the unpredictability of human ingenuity combined with desperation. Their tomb worlds, vast and eternal in the Warhammer galaxy, were designed to be isolated, to awaken only against known enemies. Earth, a chaotic, unpredictable world of rapidly adapting life, presented variables they could not fully compute. It was here that the first sparks of resistance found purchase. Dr. Voss theorized that the Necrons' command structure might be disrupted by localized energy interference. Kara Sun's abilities, combined with her intuition of Necron temporal shifts, allowed the team to predict minor movements of the enemy. For the first time, humans could strike strategically, even if the cost was catastrophic. The battles that followed were harrowing. In the ruins of New York, a single squad of human survivors, guided by Voss and empowered by Sun's psychic precognition, delayed a Necron advance for several hours. Their victory was temporary, but monumental. They had learned that the Necrons were not infallible. The resistance was no longer theoretical. It existed, and with each small victory, the embers of hope spread. Yet even as humanity adapted, the Necrons advanced. A greater purpose guided them, a reclamation not only of Earth, but of energy flows that connected the multiverse. Each tomb ship acted not merely as a weapon, but as a conduit, drawing power from dimensions unknown, creating localized distortions that made Earth increasingly unstable. If unchecked, the planet itself might tear apart before humanity had the chance to organize a true counterattack. This urgency framed the Resistance's next steps: understanding, adapting, and surviving long enough to strike at the heart of the Necron logic itself. In these moments, the first true alliances emerged. Military factions, previously divided by politics and ideology, joined forces under Voss's leadership. Scientists and psychics formed advisory councils, melding intuition with calculation. Ordinary citizens, initially paralyzed by fear, took up arms, guided by knowledge that small acts of defiance could echo across the battlefield of reality. Each act, however minor, chipped away at the Necron's aura of inevitability. Humanity had begun to awaken to a brutal truth. In the face of beings who had conquered galaxies, survival depended not on strength, but on cunning, adaptation, and the courage to face an impossible enemy. Dr. Voss, alone in a subterranean observatory beneath what had been Berlin, finally made a breakthrough. By cross, referencing the Necron energy signatures with ancient artifacts recovered from the tomb ships, she detected a pattern, a residual echo of the Necrons' own history, a flaw buried deep within their programming, a memory that predated their transformation into living metal, could, if exploited, create temporary disorientation, confusion, even conflict among the Necron ranks. It was fragile, dangerous, and untested, but it was the first real indication that the invincible might be vulnerable. What would you do if the very ground beneath your feet betrayed you? If the city you once called home transformed into a tomb for the living, silent, cold, and precise. Humanity was beginning to discover that the Necrons were not merely invaders, they were inevitabilities, forces of order so absolute that chaos itself seemed an act of blasphemy. And yet, from the shadows of ruin, the first true crucibles of resistance were about to be forged. The first wave of coordinated attacks came in the dead of night, in what remained of Shanghai. Necron Triarch stalkers advanced with terrifying deliberation, machines walking with the ease of thought itself. Buildings crumbled under Gauss disintegrators, leaving streets littered with ash and twisted metal. Civilians fled in every direction, screaming, though even their cries seemed to fade beneath the rhythmic hum of Necron engines. Amid the chaos, Captain Rin Voss and a select team of resistance fighters moved silently, navigating the debris with a combination of military precision and learned intuition. Each step was measured, each breath contained, each heartbeat a reminder that failure would mean extinction. Kara Sun's abilities had grown since the first tremors of psychic awakening. She could sense temporal ripples in the Necrons' movements, brief distortions where their steps lagged against the flow of reality, minor glitches caused by the interference patterns Dr. Voss had theorized. Using these fleeting moments, Voss's team could anticipate attacks with uncanny accuracy, slipping between the Necron formations as predators between blades of grass. Yet even with this advantage, the losses were staggering. Friends, allies, and volunteers fell under weapons that could dissolve matter at a molecular level. Survival was no longer guaranteed, it was miraculous. Meanwhile, Dr. Voss uncovered a revelation within the tomb ships themselves. Hidden deep within the machinery were echoes of the Necrons' past, the faint residue of the Cetan's influence, a manipulation of consciousness that had once enslaved the Necronter. She realized that the Necrons' perfection was not absolute. Memory and history had been encoded into their metallic forms, and with precise disruption, it might be possible to awaken fragments of the Necrons' original selves, flashes of the beings that had once known pain, fear, and mortality. But such an attempt was perilous. Awakening these remnants could provoke the Necrons' wrath, turning an already deadly enemy into something utterly incomprehensible. The first crucible of humanity's resolve came when a Necron overlord massive, crowned with the sigils of an extinct dynasty, descended upon London. Its approach was silent yet unavoidable, a shadow over a city that had already surrendered hope. Captain Voss knew that this confrontation would define the resistance. They could not hope to destroy the overlord through conventional means. Instead, the plan relied on prediction, timing, and exploiting the one vulnerability Dr. Voss had identified, a flaw in the temporal coherence of the Necron mind when forced to reconcile echoes of its past. Kara Sun positioned herself at the city's center, her psychic focus stretched to the limits, sensing the overlord's intent before it materialized. The battle was not a battle as humans understood it. Buildings dissolved in bursts of alien energy, streets fractured and warped under the overlord's presence. The air itself hummed with a sound that was neither vibration nor silence, but a fusion of both. Voss's squad moved like ghosts, weaving between disintegrated cars and walls that no longer existed, striking at moments of hesitation, moments so brief they might have been imagined. Kara Sun extended her senses further than ever before, reaching into the Necrons' memory patterns, pulling shards of their ancient selves into consciousness. For a heartbeat, the overlord faltered, its steps wavered, its lights flickered, and in that infinitesimal lapse, humanity struck. Yet the cost was immediate and brutal. Voss's seconding, command, Lieutenant Aaron Kale, was vaporized as he attempted to draw the Overlord's attention. His sacrifice bought moments, but it was a reminder of the stakes. For every victory, death shadowed every step. Kara Sun's psychic powers pushed her to the brink of collapse. Visions of the Necron past merging with the present, threatening to unravel her sanity. And even as the Overlord recoiled, the rest of its forces began adapting. The war was not just for territory. It was for understanding, a clash of logic and instinct, of ancient order versus fleeting chaos. Dr. Voss, observing remotely through improvised monitoring devices, realized that the disruption they had achieved could be amplified. By targeting multiple Necron nodes simultaneously and synchronizing psychic feedback with human weaponry, it might be possible to force more Necron units into temporary self-conflict. The discovery represented a paradigm shift. Humans might not destroy the Necrons, but they could disrupt them, exploit fractures in their timeless minds, and create openings where none had existed before. The ramifications of this knowledge spread like wildfire among the resistance. Teams across Europe, North America, and Asia began experimenting with coordinated strikes, blending psychic precognition, rapid mobility, and technology adapted from Necron remnants. Humanity's first major victories were fragile, tactical, and won at tremendous cost, yet they were victories nonetheless. Cities once abandoned saw small pockets of resistance reclaiming districts. The aura of inevitability surrounding the Necrons began to show cracks, thin, fleeting, but enough to ignite hope. But even as victories mounted, a greater danger loomed. Dr. Voss's research revealed that the Necrons were not simply marching blindly. They were following a purpose far beyond simple conquest. Their tomb ships were mapping Earth, harvesting energy flows, and restructuring matter in ways that hinted at a far larger design. There were signs of a greater awakening, a synchronization across the planet that, if completed, might render humanity irrelevant, a mere footnote in a cosmic equation they could not comprehend. What happens when the deadest of the dead begin to remember? The Necrons were not simply machines, they were living echoes of a civilization that had endured beyond comprehension. As humanity clawed its way through shattered cities, each victory came at a staggering price, and yet, for the first time, they understood that the enemy's perfection was not absolute. Memories, buried deep within the Necron constructs, were flickering to life, creating hesitation, fragmentation, and an opportunity, a fleeting window in which humanity might strike. Dr. Ilara Voss pored over data collected from Shanghai, London, and Berlin. She had been tracing subtle energy signatures within the Necron forces, anomalies that suggested internal conflict. It was as if the ghosts of the Necronter, long thought dead, were surfacing in the cold, metallic bodies of the warriors. The more she observed, the more she realized that these echoes were not random, they were fragments of personality, buried under millennia of Cetan indoctrination, repressed yet persistent. Each fragment represented a chance to disrupt the Necrons' unity, to turn their perfection against themselves. Meanwhile, Captain Rin Voss led an operation deep into the heart of New York City, now a skeletal urban graveyard. Their objective was audacious: to infiltrate a Necron tomb node, a subterranean stronghold from which the invaders were coordinating their assault. Streets were rivers of debris, buildings stood like shattered monuments. The team moved cautiously, every step calculated, every breath measured. Each corner held potential death, an advanced warrior, a Gauss trap, or a temporal anomaly capable of erasing existence itself. But for Voss, hesitation was a luxury humanity could no longer afford. Kara Sun, at the forefront, sensed the Necron's internal struggle. She had begun to perceive not just the echoes of their history, but their fragments of emotion, curiosity, memory, even a faint trace of the fear that once haunted the Necronter. It was intoxicating, dangerous, and a source of hope. Using her precognition, the team avoided the worst of the Necron traps, striking only when the temporal distortions created brief lapses in the enemy's perfect coordination. It was the first time humanity had observed an actionable flaw on such a scale, a glimpse into the possibility of true victory. Yet the Necrons themselves were evolving in response. The Overlord coordinating the assault on North America began adapting to human strategies, predicting movement patterns, and reinforcing nodes with precision. It became increasingly clear that the Necrons were not merely fighting. They were learning. Humanity's small victories were teaching them, and for every triumph, a countermeasure emerged. The war had transformed into a brutal game of intellect, a battle of adaptation stretching across cities and continents, testing not only survival but ingenuity. Dr. Voss discovered a chilling artifact buried within the Central Tomb node in New York, a shard of a Cetan embedded within a Necron construct. Unlike the other Necron technologies, this shard emitted a faint, pulsating energy, as though attempting to communicate, or perhaps manipulate. Its discovery revealed the terrifying truth. The Necrons were not acting alone. Forces older than even their civilization, the Cetan, had left behind instruments of unimaginable power. If activated, these could warp reality, erase human history, or bend time itself. Humanity was not merely fighting soldiers. They were fighting the remnants of a god. The first major confrontation within the tomb node was catastrophic. Voss's team encountered the Overlord in the catacombs below Manhattan. It towered over them, living metal shifting like a river, its eyes glowing with stars lost to time. Every weapon fired melted harmlessly on its surface. Every attempt to advance met with countermeasures. Yet in a moment of rare hesitation, a pulse of memory from the Necronter within the Overlord paused. Kara Sun focused every ounce of her psychic energy, amplifying the internal conflict. For a few heartbeats, the machine faltered, and humanity struck with precision. Energy discharged, circuits shorted, and the Overlord staggered. But the victory was partial, bitter, and costly. Voss's squad was reduced, and even Kara Sun collapsed, nearly broken by the strain of channeling ancient memories. The significance of this battle rippled across humanity. It was proof. The Necrons could be disrupted, their perfection challenged. It was a revelation that brought both hope and terror. Hope, because it meant the invaders were not infallible. Terror, because even partial disruption required sacrifice, knowledge, and psychic capability far beyond what humans naturally possessed. The war was no longer just physical. It was mental, spiritual, and temporal, and every encounter left humanity more stretched, more exhausted, and more desperate. And yet, even as humans celebrated fleeting victories, the larger truth emerged. The Necron tomb ships were not simply invaders. They were terraformers, reshaping Earth to suit a design that humanity could scarcely comprehend. Dr. Voss realized that their activity was creating localized distortions in reality itself, anomalies that could eventually fracture the planet if unchecked. Every day the Necrons remained, the planet's structure weakened, magnetic fields fluctuated, and the veil between realities thinned. Earth itself was at risk of becoming a tomb, not just for humans, but for reality as they knew it. What is the weight of eternity pressing down on a single world? That is the question humanity was about to answer. The Necrons were no longer simply invaders. They were a force rewriting the very essence of existence. their tomb ships casting shadows that bent light and time. The first battles had taught humans that the invaders were not omnipotent, but every victory came with staggering cost. Entire cities had become graveyards, entire populations vanished, and those who survived were stretched to the brink of exhaustion, sanity, and belief. Captain Rin Voss convened the remnants of the global resistance in what had once been the United Nations headquarters in Geneva. The room was dim, lit by flickering generators, screens displaying live feeds of Necron activity. Voss's face, lined with fatigue, was resolute. "We are fighting not just soldiers," he said, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "We are fighting eternity itself. Every plan we make must account for centuries of preparation, for enemies who understand the universe in ways we cannot. But they are not invincible. They are not perfect, and today we take the first step toward proving it." Dr. Ilara Voss had made another breakthrough. By analyzing energy flows from Necron tomb nodes, she discovered that the invaders were converging on several ley lines, natural conduits of Earth's latent energy. These points were being harnessed to power the Seat-and shard she had discovered, amplifying its ability to manipulate matter, time, and energy on a planetary scale. If left unchecked, these nodes could be activated simultaneously, creating distortions that might unmake entire continents. The revelation was horrifying. The Necrons' ultimate goal was not merely conquest. It was transformation, reshaping Earth into a monument of perfection, a silent tomb for every living thing. Kara's son, still recovering from her psychic overexertion, joined Voss and Voss in planning a coordinated strike. Her abilities had grown, her perception of the Necrons' temporal anomalies sharper than ever. "We can disrupt their convergence," she said, voice strained but firm. "If we synchronize our attacks across multiple nodes, we can force a cascade of instability in their network. But it will require precision, timing, and sacrifice." Her words hung heavy in the air, for they all understood the implication. Victory would demand lives, and perhaps more than anyone dared to calculate. The first phase of the plan was reconnaissance. Teams of scientists, soldiers, and psychics infiltrated partially activated tomb nodes in Europe, Asia, and North America. Each mission tested humanity's limits. Necron defenses were adaptive, lethal, and unyielding. Soldiers fell, machines overloaded, and psychic strains threatened collapse. Yet every encounter brought vital intelligence. They mapped the Necron network, traced energy conduits, and discovered patterns in the invaders' otherwise incomprehensible logic. Humanity was learning to think like the enemy, to anticipate movements, and to exploit fleeting moments of imperfection. In the ruins of Paris, Voss led a strike team directly into a Necron node. The corridors were alive with energy, a hum that vibrated through every bone, every nerve, every thought. Triarch stalkers emerged from the shadows, their movements precise, yet occasionally erratic. Kara Sun extended her psychic senses, detecting moments where the internal conflict of the Necrons, the echo of the Necronters' buried memories, created lapses in their coordination. In these moments, humanity struck with brutal efficiency. The node was damaged, partially destroyed, but at the cost of half the team. Voss's eyes, reflecting the alien glow, were unyielding. Every loss hardened them, every success fueled the spark of defiance. Across the globe, similar operations unfolded. In Tokyo, in Moscow, in Rio, humanity's forces tested their mettle against the relentless invaders. Each engagement revealed a critical insight. The Necrons were not acting blindly. They were reacting, learning, adapting. Their machines, though ancient and cold, were now engaging in a form of strategy, modifying their attacks to counter human ingenuity. Victory would not come from force, it would come from understanding, timing, and the ability to manipulate the Necron network itself. But the Necrons had not yet revealed their full power. From the heart of Antarctica, a massive tomb ship began to awaken. A vessel unlike any seen before, a superstructure of black metal that dwarfed continents, resonating with energy that seemed to fracture reality itself. It was a relic of a dynasty older than memory, and its emergence sent tremors through Earth's magnetic fields, bending the auroras into unnatural spirals. This ship, Dr. Voss theorized, was not just a warship. It was a conductor designed to unify the energies of all the Necron nodes on Earth, activating the seat and shard at full capacity. The scale of the threat became chillingly clear. Failure meant annihilation, not merely of humanity, but of the planet's very structure. How far can humanity push when the universe itself seemed against them? This was no longer a question of survival. It was a question of defiance. Across continents, shattered governments, and scattered resistance, cells began to synchronize under Captain Rin Voss's leadership. The plan was audacious. Simultaneous strikes on all active Necron nodes, combined with psychic disruption from Kara's sun and technological interference orchestrated by Dr. Elara Voss. Humanity was stepping into the eye of the storm, fully aware that failure would mean total annihilation. The first stage of the counteroffensive began at dawn, though dawn itself felt artificial beneath the shadow of Necron tomb ships. In Europe, teams infiltrated nodes in London, Paris, and Berlin. In Asia, operatives struck Shanghai and Tokyo. North America saw teams advancing through the ruins of New York and Chicago, every movement monitored by psychic projections from Kara Sun, who could perceive the micro intervals in Necron movement patterns. The plan relied on synchronization. Energy bursts had to occur simultaneously across time zones, or the entire strategy would collapse. In London, Voss led a squad deep into a partially awakened tomb node. The air vibrated with unnatural energy. Walls and floors shimmered, distorting perception. Necron warriors appeared in perfect formation, yet they hesitated at certain intervals, a subtle echo of their buried memories causing temporal irregularities. Voss's team exploited these brief lapses, striking with precision, using experimental energy weapons designed to disrupt the Necron's internal coherence. Each shot, each move was a gamble, a balance between life and death measured in milliseconds. Meanwhile, Kara Sun's psychic influence stretched across the battlefield. She probed the Necron's consciousness, amplifying hesitation and forcing conflicts within their ranks. For a moment, it seemed almost possible. The invaders, perfect and eternal, wavered under the combined weight of human ingenuity and psychic assault. Across the globe, similar scenarios unfolded. Teams in Tokyo disrupted the energy conduits powering the Cetan shard. Operatives in Moscow sabotaged temporal field generators. In Rio, resistance fighters intercepted Necron reinforcements before they could reach critical nodes. Humanity was fighting not as soldiers, but as architects of chaos, bending order itself against perfection. Yet the cost was immediate and severe. Soldiers fell in waves, cities collapsed under secondary Necron attacks, and psychic strains took their toll. Kara Sun's consciousness teetered on the edge of collapse, her body racked with the feedback of 1,000 Necron minds. Captain Voss, relentless and exhausted, watched allies perish while pressing forward, understanding that hesitation could mean the end of everything. Even Dr. Voss, from her command center, was pushed to extremes, manipulating alien energy flows in ways no human had ever attempted, risking rupture of the very dimensional fabric she sought to protect. The pivotal moment came when the Antarctic tomb ship fully awakened, towering above the ice with the weight of eons. Its purpose became horrifyingly clear: to unify all Earth-bound Necron nodes, channeling energy through the sea and shard, and restructuring the planet into a monument of alien order. Humanity's attacks disrupted some nodes, but the tomb ship's power surged, bending reality itself. Ice cracked into impossible geometries. Auroras danced in unnatural spirals, and the laws of physics warped around the ship's colossal form. The scale of the challenge was beyond comprehension. Humanity's ingenuity had achieved only a fragile balance against near-omnipotent forces. Amid the chaos, Voss, Sun, and Voss realized the critical truth. The key to victory lay not in brute force, but in exploiting the Necrons' fractured consciousness. The shard within the Antarctic tomb ship, while immensely powerful, was tied to their internal echoes, the buried Necronter memories that Kara Sun could sense. By amplifying these conflicts on a planetary scale, they might create a temporal collapse within the Necron network, a brief window in which the tomb ship could be neutralized or at least delayed. The plan was audacious, nearly suicidal. Teams worldwide synchronized attacks, targeting the tomb ship's energy nodes, while Kara Sun projected psychic interference across the network. For a moment, the impossible seemed within reach. Tremors shook the globe as fissures appeared in the Necron structure. Lights flickered along the tomb ship's surface, and temporal distortions created brief, chaotic gaps in the Necron ranks. Humanity's combined ingenuity, courage, and desperation had achieved something extraordinary. They were no longer just surviving. They were fighting back on a scale that rivaled the Necrons' own design, yet victory remained uncertain. The Necron overlords, sensing disruption, began to adapt in real time. Their learning curve, honed over millennia, allowed them to counter some of humanity's strategies, creating localized catastrophes. Cities became death traps, soldiers were lost in temporal anomalies, and the sheer scale of the Antarctic tomb ship's power reminded humanity that their survival hung by a thread. The war was not over, far from it. What is it like to stand before a force older than time, so immense that hope itself feels small? That was the reality humanity faced as the Antarctic tomb ship loomed above the ice. Its black metal surface stretched for miles, rivulets of energy pulsating like the heartbeat of a dying star. The auroras twisted violently around it, magnetic fields warping in impossible arcs, and the air carried a hum that seemed to bypass sound entirely, vibrating directly into the marrow of every human standing below. The world had never seen anything like it. And yet, humanity's defenders were undeterred, not because they believed in certain victory, but because surrender had ceased to be an option. Captain Rin Voss coordinated operations from the field, his eyes scanning digital overlays of the tomb ship's massive energy conduits. The plan was audacious. Teams from across the globe would converge, striking simultaneously at the ship's peripheral nodes to destabilize the energy flows feeding the seat and shard. Meanwhile, Kara Sun would project psychic interference across the Necron network, amplifying echoes of the ancient Necronter memories buried within the tomb ship itself. And Dr. Voss, stationed deep within a subterranean base beneath the Andes, would manipulate experimental devices designed to overload the Necron conduits with destabilizing energy patterns. The operation was unprecedented, and the risks were beyond comprehension. As the teams approached the ship, the sheer scale of the Necron construct became evident. Its surface rippled with energy, sometimes shifting as if the metal itself were alive, flexing with an intelligence that was terrifying in its precision. Triarch stalkers patrolled in patterns that seemed simultaneously chaotic and perfect, adaptive machines that had learned from every human encounter. Every step forward was a perilous gamble. Miscalculation meant vaporization, erasure, or worse. A localized temporal collapse that could trap entire units in frozen, unending seconds. Kara Sun's psychic projection extended further than ever before. She sensed the buried memories within the Necrons' moments of fear, hesitation, and regret hidden beneath layers of machine logic. By amplifying these fragments, she forced internal conflict across the tomb ship's systems. Lights flickered along the colossal structure. Energy conduits shimmered and bent. For a heartbeat, the Antarctic colossus seemed vulnerable. Humanity struck with coordinated precision, explosions rippling along its surface, energy discharges causing temporary malfunctions in Necron defenses. Yet the Necron overlords reacted swiftly. Adaptive programming reconfigured the tomb ship's response in real time. Sections of the vessel's hull transformed, forming new defensive barriers. Gauss weapons fired with predictive accuracy, disintegrating entire squads before they could strike. The aurora spirals intensified, bending light and reality in unpredictable ways, and the ground itself cracked beneath the enormous energy flows. Even as humanity exploited fleeting weaknesses, the sheer scale of the Necron machine reminded them that they were dealing with an intelligence shaped by millennia of survival and war. Amid the chaos, individual acts of heroism defined the battle. Lieutenant Aaron Kale's replacement, Sergeant Maya Torin, led a squad directly into one of the ship's lateral conduits, sacrificing herself to destroy a critical energy node feeding the seat and shard. Elsewhere, Kara Sun extended her psychic projection beyond what any human had ever attempted, risking complete neurological collapse to induce dissonance within the Necron network. Her body trembled violently, and her mind teetered on the edge of dissolution, but the echoes of the Necronter within the tomb ship faltered, giving humanity precious seconds to act. Dr. Voss's experimental devices struck in perfect synchronization with the coordinated attacks. Energy pulses overloaded several nodes simultaneously, creating cascading failures throughout the tomb ship. Sections of the Antarctic colossus fractured, shimmering with unstable energy patterns. The ship groaned as though alive, responding to pain, confusion, and memory in equal measure. Humanity had, for the first time, forced a Necron superstructure into retreat, not a complete destruction, but a disruption that bought critical time. However, the victory was Pyrrhic. Cities across the globe felt the tremors of the tomb ship's energy surges. Entire districts were leveled by backlashes of unstable matter. Thousands of human lives were lost, and the psychological toll of confronting a machine that could bend time, matter, and memory was incalculable. Captain Voss understood that humanity had survived not because of strength, but because of audacity, ingenuity, and sacrifice. Each victory came with a price, and each price weighed heavily on the fragile resilience of those who remained. Yet even in the shadow of catastrophe, hope persisted. The first cracks in the Necron armor, temporal disruptions, internal conflict, and psychic interference proved that their perfection was not absolute. Humanity's ingenuity, when combined with courage, adaptation, and sacrifice, could challenge forces older than the stars themselves. Kara Sun, though weakened and trembling, sensed the path forward. Coordinated global strikes, amplification of psychic interference, and exploitation of the Necron echoes could yield even greater disruption, perhaps enough to prevent the activation of the seat, and shard entirely. What happens when the hunter becomes the hunted, and the predator has learned your every move? Humanity had struck at the Antarctic tomb ship and forced temporary disruption, but the cost had been staggering. Cities lay in ruin, thousands had perished, and the survivors were exhausted, both physically and mentally. Yet even in their fragility, they had glimpsed a truth. The Necrons were not invincible, but the ancient invaders had also learned. Their patience, their millennia of experience, had prepared them for retaliation, and now the counterstrike of eternity was beginning. The Necrons' response was swift and brutal. Tomb ships across the globe activated in unison, sending reinforcements and mechanized armies toward the weakened human strongholds. Energy pulses radiated outward, destabilizing cities already teetering on the edge of collapse. Triarch stalkers and immortals moved in calculated waves, predicting human countermeasures and exploiting any hesitation. Every mistake was punished with devastating precision. Humanity's ingenuity, while formidable, was now under direct assault by a foe that adapted faster than the human mind could process. Captain Rin Voss organized a defense, but it was no longer a question of attack. It was a desperate holding action. Using knowledge gained from previous engagements, Voss positioned human forces in defensive choke points, incorporating psychic projections from Kara-Sun to predict enemy movements. Entire cities became traps for the invaders. Collapsed buildings, improvised energy disruptors, and synchronized strikes aimed at destabilizing the Necron advance. Yet the sheer scale of the assault was overwhelming. Even the smallest lapse could result in annihilation. Kara-Sun, aware of the and FULLY limb of her PS sub-CH within IC abilities, extended her consciousness across multiple nodes simultaneously. She sensed the Necron's internal conflicts, echoes of the Necronter past, remnants of memories long buried. But maintaining this connection drained her body and mind. Her vision blurred, her muscles trembled, yet the psychic dissonance she induced was the only thing slowing the relentless advance of the Necron forces. Every heartbeat was a struggle, every second an act of defiance against a foe older than civilization itself. Dr. Ilara Voss, working in a mobile command hub beneath the Andes, coordinated energy pulses designed to overload Necron nodes already destabilized by Kara-Sun. The technology was experimental, dangerous, and untested on a planetary scale. Each pulse risked further fracturing reality, potentially endangering human life along with the enemy. Yet it was a gamble they had to take. The Antarctic tomb ship, the focal point of Necron operations, had begun to recover from the previous disruption, and if allowed to stabilize, it could activate the seat and shard at full capacity, potentially reshaping the planet into a monument of alien order. In the field, human soldiers fought with a ferocity born of desperation. Entire squads engaged Necron units, buying time for critical operations. Weapons that had once seemed primitive now became tools of precision, targeting weak points identified through psychic insight and Dr. Voss's calculations. Explosions rocked the landscape, temporal distortions created chaotic battlefields, and soldiers moved like ghosts, slipping between glimpses of a reality bent by alien technology. Every encounter was a gamble with eternity itself, every success measured against staggering loss. The Necrons, however, were relentless. Adaptive algorithms learned from each skirmish, reconfiguring formations and energy patterns. Triarch stalkers developed countermeasures to human attacks. Immortals reinforced key positions, and even dormant overlords activated across the globe, converging towards strategic locations. Humanity's victories became tenuous, stretched thinner by the scope and precision of the counterattack. The realization hit hard: survival alone was not enough. Humanity had to not only fight, but outthink a civilization older than the stars. Amid the chaos, Voss, Sun, and Voss discovered a critical insight. The Antarctic Tomb ship's core operated as a nexus, linking the Necron network globally. If destabilized, it could create a cascading failure, amplifying human strikes across multiple nodes. But doing so would require extreme coordination, precise timing, and the amplification of Kara Sun's psychic power beyond anything previously attempted. Failure would be catastrophic. Success could create the first real chance at turning the tide. Humanity braces for the decisive confrontation. The Necrons' counterattack has exposed the fragility of human gains, demonstrating that even fleeting victories carry enormous risk. The Antarctic Tomb ship looms above, a testament to eons of calculated perfection, while humanity's defenders stand battered but unbroken. The question now is not whether they can survive the onslaught, but whether they can wield knowledge, sacrifice, and psychic power to turn fleeting weaknesses into a lasting advantage against an enemy older than time itself. And the question lingers: when eternity strikes back with full force, will humanity endure? Or will it crumble under the weight of the cosmos? What does it mean to challenge eternity itself? Humanity had survived the initial Necron invasion, endured staggering losses, and glimpsed the possibility of resistance. But now the stakes had risen beyond anything imaginable. The Antarctic Tomb ship, colossal and ancient, loomed like a shadow over the planet, feeding energy into the seat, and shard and synchronizing the global network of Necron nodes. Its activation promised a reshaping of Earth into an alien monument, a perfection that humanity could neither comprehend nor survive. The final offensive would demand every ounce of courage, ingenuity, and sacrifice. Captain Rin Voss stood at the forefront of the operation, coordinating the largest combined human strike in recorded history. Military forces, scientists, and psychics across continents had been synchronized to act simultaneously. Every strike, every movement, every pulse of energy was calculated down to the millisecond. The goal was not to destroy the Necrons, they were too perfect for that, but to destabilize the network long enough to prevent the sea and Shard from reaching full power. Humanity's survival depended on precision, adaptation, and the willingness to pay unimaginable costs. Kara Sun, now pushing the limits of her psychic abilities, projected her consciousness across the Antarctic Tomb ship and every active node worldwide. She reached into the echoes of the Necronter buried deep within the invaders' minds, amplifying hesitation, fear, and memory. Her body trembled violently, her mind threatened to unravel, yet the psychic interference worked. Lights along the tomb ship flickered, energy conduits shuddered, and the first visible cracks appeared in the near-impenetrable surface. For the first time, eternity seemed vulnerable, even if only for moments. Dr. Ilera Voss coordinated from multiple locations, synchronizing experimental devices designed to overload Necron energy conduits. Energy pulses radiated in precise patterns, timed to coincide with Kara Sun's psychic dissonance. Across the globe, nodes destabilized simultaneously. London, Tokyo, New York, Moscow, and Paris, every major tomb node was targeted in perfect coordination. Explosions, temporal distortions, and energy discharges cascaded in waves, creating chaos within the Necron ranks. The adaptive invaders, despite their millennia of intelligence, faltered under the simultaneous pressures of psychic interference and human ingenuity. In the field, Captain Voss led a strike team directly into one of the Antarctic Tomb ship's peripheral conduits. The corridors were alive with shifting metal, energy rippling along walls, floors, and ceilings. Triarch stalkers and immortals advanced with deadly precision, yet Voss's squad moved with the advantage of foresight, exploiting lapses in Necron coordination induced by Sun's psychic projection. Every step was perilous. Every shot could be the difference between survival and oblivion. Explosions rocked the structure, energy surges fractured matter itself, and the soldiers pressed forward, fully aware that failure meant death. As the battle reached its apex, the Antarctic Tomb ship itself reacted. The massive sea, and shard at its core, glowed with incomprehensible energy, pulsating like a heartbeat that stretched across continents. Temporal anomalies grew unstable, reality itself warping as energy flowed through the network. The Necrons, sensing the disruption, concentrated forces in defense of the shard, deploying overlords and adaptive constructs to maintain control. Humanity's gains were fragile, the margin for error microscopic, and yet the defenders pressed forward. The world seemed to hold its breath, suspended between survival and annihilation. The first critical breach came when Kara Sun, fully immersed in the Necron network, identified a sequence of energy conduits whose destabilization could ripple across the entire system. With Voss leading the ground assault and Dr. Voss amplifying energy interference, these conduits were struck simultaneously. The Antarctic Tomb ship groaned, energy patterns wavered, and massive sections of the hull fractured. For a brief, blinding moment, the invaders were disoriented, their perfect coordination shattered. Humanity had created a window, a fleeting chance to alter the course of the war. But the cost was immense. Soldiers fell in waves, psychic feedback threatened to destroy Kara Sun, and Dr. Voss's experimental devices pushed the planet's energy fields to dangerous extremes. Cities across the globe trembled as temporal distortions spread, yet humanity's coordination remained unbroken. Captain Voss, bloodied and exhausted, pressed forward into the heart of the tomb ship, knowing that the window of opportunity was closing. Each second counted, and every decision carried the weight of life, death, and the survival of the species. What does it mean to stand against eternity itself? Humanity had endured unimaginable trials, cities reduced to rubble, thousands lost, psychic strain pushing minds to the brink. And yet, here they stood on the precipice of the final confrontation. The Antarctic Tomb ship loomed like a black mountain against the frozen sky, its sea and shard pulsing with energy that threatened to unmake the planet. Every strike, every moment of planning, every ounce of courage had led to this instant. The fate of the world, and perhaps the universe itself, hung in a fragile balance. Captain Rin Voss gathered the remaining strike forces, their faces smeared with soot, exhaustion, and resolve. "This is it," he said, voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Everything we've done, every life lost, every sacrifice, leads to this moment. We are the last chance. We fight not just to survive, but to defy what has never been defied." Around him, soldiers adjusted weapons, checked energy disruptors, and steeled themselves for the impossible. Each knew the odds were near zero, yet surrender was not an option. Humanity had already come too far. Kara Sun, hovering at the edge of psychic collapse, projected her consciousness fully into the Necron network. She reached into the echoes of the Necronter, amplifying hesitation, fear, and memory to maximum intensity. The sea-tan shard's power reacted violently, the alien energy pulsing in unstable patterns, cracking, shuddering, and flickering. For the first time, the Antarctic tomb ship wavered, not merely disrupted, but vulnerable. Reality itself seemed to stretch, bend, and pause under the weight of human determination. Every second of psychic exertion brought Sun closer to total collapse, yet every heartbeat was a lifeline for the planet. Dr. Ilara Voss coordinated from the command hub, sending synchronized energy pulses into the Antarctic tomb ship's conduits. Every device, every calculation, every carefully timed overload was executed with machine-like precision. The energy feedback cascaded through the Necron network, forcing nodes worldwide into conflict and confusion. Explosions and distortions rocked the ice and sky, sending shockwaves visible across continents. Humanity had pushed the Necrons to their limit, exploiting fractures that had lain buried for millennia. In the field, Captain Voss led a final assault into the core of the tomb ship. Triarch stalkers and immortals swarmed in precise formations, yet the lapses created by Sun's psychic interference allowed human forces to advance. Voss's squad moved like shadows, striking at energy nodes, disabling conduits, and buying precious seconds. Every step forward was a battle against both the Necrons and the very structure of reality itself, which groaned, shifted, and resisted with incomprehensible force. The pivotal moment arrived when the C-10 shard began to destabilize. Energy spirals writhed, conduits fractured, and the Antarctic tomb ship shuddered as if alive. The echoes of the Necronter surged through the network, amplified by Kara Sun's psychic projection, creating an unprecedented conflict within the invaders' ranks. Overlords staggered, immortals faltered, and even the most advanced constructs experienced glitches. Humanity had forced a rare vulnerability, a glimpse of imperfection in a civilization older than the stars. But victory demanded sacrifice. Kara Sun's body trembled violently, consciousness stretched beyond mortal limits. Voss and his squad faced waves of adaptive Necron forces with dwindling ammunition and faltering defenses. Dr. Voss risked catastrophic energy feedback that could destroy the Antarctic tomb ship, but might also devastate the surrounding continent. Every action teetered on the edge of annihilation. Yet, despite the cost, the human will persisted. With one final, coordinated surge, the Antarctic tomb ship fractured. Energy conduits collapsed in on themselves, the C-10 shard cracked and dimmed, and the Necron network imploded in cascading failures. Triarch stalkers fell inert, overlords collapsed, and immortals became statues of living metal. Humanity had done the impossible. They had forced a civilization older than the stars into defeat, not through overwhelming force, but through ingenuity, coordination, and unyielding courage. In the aftermath, silence fell over the shattered ice. The Antarctic tomb ship lay fractured, dormant yet still imposing, a reminder of the forces that humanity had faced. Across the globe, the Necron nodes were inert, the C-10 shard shattered into harmless fragments, and survivors emerged from rubble and ruin. Humanity had endured, but at a staggering cost. Millions had perished, cities lay in ruin, and the world itself bore scars of the temporal distortions and energy surges unleashed in the final battle. Captain Voss, battered and bloodied, looked across the frozen battlefield. Kara Sun lay unconscious but alive, her psychic essence slowly returning. Dr. Voss monitored the remnants of the Necron energy fields, ensuring no resurgence. The victory was real, but fragile. Humanity had proven it could challenge eternity, but the universe had taught them a brutal lesson. Even victory could demand sacrifice beyond comprehension, and the scars of war would echo generations.